The first time Dralux met a human, he'd been told they were fragile. Not physically weak, per se, though certainly less reinforced than the armored Kothari or the silicon-boned Vren, but emotionally transparent. Predictable. Prone to outbursts. Incapable of suppressing pain responses. The manual had been very clear: do not misread human expressions. Their capacity to hide physical distress is negligible. Pain will manifest, obviously. So when Commander Reth sent Dralux to the surface of Ravenous 12, an unremarkable mining planet with a breathable atmosphere and an unfortunate habit of tectonic hiccups, he didn't expect much from the lone human in the squad. A medic's job was simple. Triage, report, stabilize. The human would likely be the first to need help. Dralux walked stiffly down the main corridor of Outpost R Delta, ducking under a low steel support beam that hadn't been built with his elongated neck in mind. A tremor rumbled through the floor, rattling his kit and causing his balance to sway. He paused next to the sealed blast door leading to the training yard where the squad was working through combat drills. A hiss and the door opened. He stepped out into the pale orange sunlight. "All right, reset it," barked a voice from the center of the yard. 2 on 2, no energy weapons. Simmons, Reyes, take the right flank. Zeke, cover center. Colton, you're with me. Colton Zade, the human. He stood out in the lineup of armored figures, his stance coiled and ready. He was tall by human standards, but not overly wide. A scar ran down the side of his left jaw, half hidden under a short beard. His eyes, a sharp gray blue, flicked over his surroundings like he was cataloging every weak point. Dralux tapped the edge of his translator unit. "Lieutenant Zade?" Colton looked over, nodding once. "You have not submitted to baseline scans for your medical profile. I will require after the drill, unless someone's already bleeding out." Colton turned back, then added with a grin, "You'll get plenty of readings if I screw up." Dralux frowned. "I do not encourage screwing up as a viable diagnostic approach. Just watch the match," Colton called as he jogged back to join his team. Dralux sighed and set up his portable scanner by the edge of the yard. The Kothari instructor barked a signal. The 4 combatants launched into motion. Colton moved differently than the others, less rigid, more reactive. He ducked under a swing, twisted, and caught one opponent's leg with a sweep. Dust exploded upward as the opponent dropped. The second fighter came at him fast. Colton caught the blow on his forearm, then pivoted, slamming his shoulder into the attacker's chest and knocking them back. The match ended when Colton pinned the largest fighter, Zeke, against the perimeter wall with his forearm at the man's throat. Dralux tapped his scanner. The human's heart rate was elevated, but not abnormally so. No signs of distress. He turned to pack up, satisfied. Then he paused. Colton was cradling his left arm slightly. Subtle, barely visible. But his gait had changed. The swing of his left side was tighter, and he wasn't flexing his fingers. Dralux strode over. "You were injured." Colton blinked. "Nah, just knocked my elbow weird. Stinger hit. It'll pass." Dralux narrowed his eyes. "Extend the arm fully. Now." Colton hesitated, then slowly raised the arm. Halfway up, he winced just barely, but Dralux caught it. "Pain response. I'm initiating a scan." He raised the handheld unit. It hummed softly, casting a pale green light over Colton's arm. The readout flickered red. "Fracture. Left radius. Mid-shaft. That arm is broken." Colton exhaled hard through his nose. "Damn it. I didn't hear a snap." "Breaks do not always vocalize," Dralux said, already pulling out a stabilizer brace. "You must cease activity immediately. Can we wrap it and I finish the drills?" Dralux stared at him. "You have a broken bone. The drills are over." Colton looked toward the command tent. "You don't understand. We've got a combat sim in 3 days. If I sit out, I'm off team lead. I am not concerned with your team dynamics. I am concerned with structural integrity of your skeletal system." Colton clenched his jaw. "Just brace it. I can still run tactics." "No heavy lifting." Dralux hesitated. This will delay healing time. You will require a full immobilization within the cycle. Fine. I'll sleep in the medbay if I have to. Just don't ground me yet. The alien medic applied the brace carefully, wrapping Colton's arm with a stabilizer mesh and securing it with bioadhesive bands. He noted the human's face tense but composed. No shouting. No moaning. Just a steady, quiet endurance. Dralux filed the observation. That night, the human didn't show up at the medbay. By morning, Dralux found him in the southern perimeter, arms still braced, leading a tactical simulation with 3 new recruits. You were instructed to rest. I am resting. Just using my mouth and legs. Arms not moving. Dralux crossed his arms. My species was taught that humans cannot conceal pain. That you are emotionally transparent. Colton gave a tired smile. We can't hide it forever. But we can work through it. You ever had a migraine? I do not possess a brain structure that supports that condition. Then you wouldn't get it. But let me tell you, a lot of pain just becomes background noise if you're focused on something else. That is not medically sound. Neither is fighting with a broken arm, Colton admitted, but here we are. 2 more days passed. Dralux monitored Colton constantly. The human slept poorly, waking often. He took meals with his dominant hand and his temper frayed with the younger recruits. But he never once asked for additional pain relief. And he never took himself off the rotation. On the 3rd day, Dralux intercepted him outside the sim chamber. You will not participate. Colton didn't argue. He just sat on the edge of a supply crate, breathing hard. I can't grip a rifle properly, he said. Didn't want to admit it yesterday. But if I dropped it during live rounds, someone could get hurt. Dralux felt a strange flicker of emotion he hadn't processed before. Not pity, more like respect. You should have reported the worsening condition. I figured I'd try to push through. Can't say I didn't. No, Dralux agreed. You cannot. He applied a full immobilizer that evening. The fracture had widened slightly from stress movement but no displacement. A clean break. 6 weeks minimum recovery with progressive mobility therapy starting at week 4. Colton didn't fight the diagnosis. He just asked, can I help with logistics while I'm grounded? Dralux nodded. I will assign you to systems monitoring. You can sit. Thanks, document. 3 weeks into recovery, Colton was already guiding drills from a chair with a headset and a datapad. His arm still bound, but healing well. Dralux noticed he never once used the injury as an excuse to avoid responsibility. He adapted, slowed down but didn't stop. One evening, while calibrating thermal sensors, Dralux turned to him. Your behavior contradicts the training I received. Colton looked up. Let me guess. They told you we cry when stubbed toes happen. That was a component. Well, some do. I'm not judging. Pain's different for everyone. But you concealed a fracture. Engaged in combat. Functioned at nearly full capacity. I wouldn't call it full capacity. I was operating at about 60% and faking the rest. That is difficult to quantify in our metrics. Colton shrugged with his good shoulder. You'll learn. Humans are good at faking things long enough to get through. Doesn't mean we don't feel it. Dralux closed the scanner. You should not have been able to function at all. Colton gave a quiet chuckle. Document. You ever try living on minimum wage on Earth? This was nothing. Dralux made a note to research minimum wage. By the time the brace came off, the Sim Squad had a new respect for their human leader. And Dralux logged the incident into the central databanks with the following note. Observation. Contrary to established doctrine, humans may suppress visible pain responses for extended periods, particularly when motivated by duty or pride. Recommend revision of medical training protocols. Do not assume visible distress is proportional to injury severity when evaluating human patients. He paused, then added one more line. Further study required. Preferably not involving another broken arm. The station cafeteria wasn't built for comfort or species diversity. The chairs were welded metal, the tables bolted down, and the lighting buzzed in a way that made humans blink more than necessary and Kothari soldiers flinch like they were being stalked. Dralux sat at the far end, long limbs folded awkwardly around a tray of nutrient broth, watching Colton Zade attempt to open a meal packet with one hand. The human's brace had been removed 4 days earlier. His range of motion was still limited, but he'd insisted on returning to regular duty. Not full combat yet, but he'd resumed training oversight. Dralux had assigned him to administrative drills, expecting the man to resent the slow return. Instead, Colton had taken to reorganizing the station's entire personnel rotation chart. Now he was stabbing the corner of a vacuum-sealed protein square with a fork, jaw tight with concentration. "You are permitted to request assistance," Dralux said, breaking the silence. "Nah, it's a point of pride now," Colton muttered. "This thing's going to open, or I'm going to die trying." Dralux considered this. "Your nutritional intake would be more efficient if you consumed the food rather than attempted warfare with it." Colton grinned without looking up. "You ever fought something that didn't want to be eaten?" "Once. Carnivorous fungus. I required a new foot." "That's either the worst snack or the best story." A loud pop echoed as the packet finally tore open. A burst of thick paste splattered across the table. Colton blinked, then scooped a bit onto his tray with exaggerated dignity. Dralux tilted his head. "Are you aware that you are the only human on this outpost who voluntarily consumes the protein paste? Had worse in field rations. We used to get these beige blocks that tasted like drywall and sadness. I do not understand the appeal of consuming something unpleasant by choice. You don't get used to it. You just start to appreciate the consistency." Dralux watched him eat in thoughtful silence. "Have you experienced any numbness in the hand since the brace was removed?" "Some tingling when I wake up. Thumb feels slower than the rest." Dralux reached into his kit. "Hold your palm out. Keep it flat." Colton complied, and Dralux ran a calibration wand along the inner wrist. A soft tone confirmed nerve conductivity was within acceptable range, but not optimal. "You will require movement exercises. I will assign you a regimen." Colton shrugged. "Fine, but I'm not doing them in the gym while everyone's watching. I already get enough flack for typing like a drunk toddler. You are not required to perform them publicly. However, if you neglect the exercises, you may lose full function. I'm not risking my trigger hand. Trust me." Dralux paused, then tapped a few notes into his datapad. "I have reviewed your service record." Colton raised an eyebrow. "That sounds ominous. You have sustained injuries during 4 separate deployments, one of which involved reconstructive surgery on your femur." "Yeah, that one was messy. Jumped out of a low hover transport, landed wrong on a slope. Bone split like a rotten branch. You were cleared for duty 3 weeks later." "Wasn't cleared. I just stopped checking in." Dralux blinked. "That is not acceptable protocol. It was a minor limp and a lot of caffeine. I wasn't going to sit out while the squad was getting shot at. I fail to understand the logic. You ever been the only one not bleeding in a fight? Feels wrong. Like you're cheating. That is not a medically sound philosophy." "No, but it's a human one." Dralux leaned back, tentacles twitching slightly in thought. "Your species appears to prioritize function over comfort, even at personal cost. Not all of us. Some people lie down the moment they get a fever. Others walk on a sprained ankle for a week because they don't want to be seen limping. Depends who raised you, I guess. What did your progenitors teach you about injury?" Colton hesitated, then stabbed another bite of paste. "Keep moving unless something's pointing the wrong way. That is not specific. It wasn't meant to be. My old man once popped his shoulder back in using a fence post and a truck bumper. That kind of thing sticks with you." Dralux didn't respond. He entered a few more notes, then stood. "I will compile your exercise schedule by second shift. You are to complete them 4 times daily." Colton nodded. "Fair enough. You ever thought about teaching? You've got that disappointed professor energy." "I have considered it, but students tend to faint when I dissect cadavers." Colton chuckled. "Yeah, that would do it." The next day, Dralux found Colton seated in the hallway outside the comms room, flexing his fingers against a resistance band. His face was drawn, sweat beading at his temple. Not from exertion, he'd only been working a few minutes, but from the dull, lingering ache of tissue rebuilding against scar tissue. You are behind schedule. Only by 20 minutes. Had a systems override to run. Excuses do not accelerate recovery. I'm doing it, aren't I? Dralux crouched beside him, watching the movement. You're compensating with the shoulder. Reduce the angle. Colton adjusted, hissed through clenched teeth, and kept going. You could request localized analgesic, Dralux offered. No point. Pain's not bad enough to need it. That is a subjective assessment. Exactly. It's mine. Dralux studied him. You are aware that untreated pain can hinder recovery. Yeah. But it also reminds me not to overdo it. That is a dangerous balancing act. That's what recovery is. Walking the line between too much and not enough. A silence settled, broken only by the snap of the resistance band. After a moment, Dralux spoke again. What would you have done if the fracture had been displaced? Taken the hit, sat out. Let someone else lead. That contradicts your earlier behavior. Colton gave a tired smile. So does being older and knowing how bad things can get if you don't stop in time. Dralux nodded once, slowly. I will adjust your regimen. Add rotational work. You are progressing. Good. Because I hate these bands. They make me feel like I'm training to open pickle jars. I do not know what that means. Count yourself lucky. By the end of the week, Colton had regained 70% function in the arm. He still couldn't support full weapon weight, but he had started sparring again, light drills, supervised. Dralux monitored every session from the observation deck, noting the subtle tightness in Colton's draw, the way he favored his offhand to absorb impact. One evening, as the station lights dimmed for rest cycle, Colton approached the medbay without a summons. He stood in the doorway, arms crossed. You ever had a patient lie about being fine just to avoid being told to rest? Dralux looked up from his console. That is a common occurrence. What do you do when you know they're lying? I document the discrepancy and advise accordingly. Even if they're still functional? Yes. Colton nodded. Then document this. I can't feel my ring finger. Started midday. Thought it was just pressure from the brace, but it's not going away. Dralux motioned him to the diagnostic chair. You should have reported it when it began. I didn't want to get benched again. You are not a bench. You are a living organism with nerves and blood vessels that must be preserved. Colton sat, sighing. You ever get tired of being right? No, the scan revealed slight nerve compression along the ulnar pathway, likely from prolonged bracing and overuse. Dralux adjusted his treatment plan immediately, adding guided stim therapy and a light anti-inflammatory compound. This will restore sensation within 2 cycles. But you must cease all weighted activity for the next 40 hours. Even push-ups? Especially push-ups. Colton groaned. I was up to 30 a set again. Then you will be at 30 again after the nerve recovers. Not before. As he applied the stim pads, Dralux hesitated. You reported voluntarily. That is significant, because I couldn't ignore it anymore. That's not bravery. That's biology. No. That is trust. Colton blinked at him. Is that your way of saying I finally earned a gold star? I am saying you no longer treat pain as a badge of honor. Yeah. Well, he flexed the hand experimentally. Turns out nerves are important. Dralux allowed a flicker of satisfaction. You were learning. Colton leaned back in the chair. Next time I get injured, I'll come to you immediately. I will hold you to that. Just make sure you bring the protein paste. I do not carry snacks. Then you've learned nothing. Dralux updated the medical record and made a mental note. In humans, trust may begin when the pain becomes undeniable, but it solidifies when they choose to speak before it does. The maintenance bay wasn't part of Dralux's usual route, but he found himself there more often than he cared to admit. The space was cluttered with spare plating, half-dismantled drones, and tangled coils of wiring that gave off a faint metallic tang. It was also the only area where Colton Zade insisted on doing his grip therapy. You're not supposed to be twisting that far, Dralux said without preamble, stepping over a disassembled coolant unit. I'm not twisting. I'm rotating. Colton sat on a low crate, his arm extended, wrist looped through a thin resistance strap anchored to a mounted bolt. Totally different motion. You are exceeding the arc I prescribed. Only by a little. It's a good burn. There is no such thing as a good burn in nerve recovery. Colton held the position another second, then let the strap go slack. Feels like progress, though. You cannot feel progress. You measure it. I like both methods. Dralux scanned the wrist with his portable unit, noting the micro-trauma along the muscle sheath. You've inflamed the soft tissue. I advised against overuse. And I listened. Then I got impatient. You will now ice it. 20 minutes. Ice is for sprains. Ice is for inflammation. Apply it or I will inject a coolant gel directly. Colton muttered something under his breath but reached for the cold pack. Dralux crouched beside him, adjusting the angle of the wrap. You were nearly at full strength last cycle. Why rush? There's an inspection team coming in 3 days. If I'm not cleared for full rotation, I get pulled from lead permanently. You are not yet ready for weapons testing. I know. That's why I was trying to speed it up. You are aware speeding it up has the opposite effect. Colton didn't answer immediately. The tension in his jaw told Dralux everything he needed. I've had worse setbacks, Colton said eventually. It's not about the arm. Then what is it about? Colton looked away toward the far wall where a diagnostic drone lay in pieces. My record's already got a few flags. If I'm seen as unreliable, I don't get reassigned to field command. You fractured a bone. That is not a character flaw. Maybe not to you. Dralux tilted his head. Do humans attach stigma to injury? Not officially. But unofficially. Colton gestured with his good hand. There's always someone younger, faster, less patched together. That is a flawed system. Welcome to the club. Dralux stood, folding his scanner. You are not to perform any unregulated exercises until I clear you. Understood, Colton said, though not enthusiastically. Say it again. With conviction. I won't do anything unregulated. Unless the station catches fire. Dralux narrowed his eyes. You are not qualified to determine fire response strategy. I took the safety course. You slept through half of it. Only the boring half. Apply ice. That night, Dralux returned to the medbay and reviewed every instance of Colton's recovery log. Muscle regeneration was on track. Nerve conductivity within range. Yet something in the human's behavior unsettled him. It wasn't recklessness. It was urgency. A quiet desperation masked under sarcasm and nonchalance. The next morning, he intercepted Colton outside the weapons range. You are not cleared for firing exercises. I'm not firing. I'm observing. You are holding a targeting guide. It's laminated. Not dangerous. Dralux took the guide and folded it under his arm. You are not to engage in any activity that strains the forearm. I wasn't planning to. You were flexing your grip on the perimeter rail. It's a reflex. Stop reflexing. Colton exhaled through his nose. You ever have a day where your body's fine but your brain won't believe it? Dralux blinked slowly. No, Colton rubbed the back of his neck. Sometimes pain sticks around longer in your head than it does in your arm. You second-guess everything. Every twinge feels like a warning. You don't know if it's real or just nerves playing games. You suspect psychogenic reinforcement. I don't know what that means, but it sounds accurate. Dralux pulled his scanner again. There's a test for that. Colton rolled his eyes. No electrodes. Just movement. Close your eyes. Colton obeyed. Now flex your fingers. Slowly. Tell me when you feel tension. Middle finger. Second knuckle. Continue. Wrist at 15 degrees. Describe the pain. Sharp then dull. Like a pulled string. Dralux watched the readings. Now imagine the same motion but do not move. Visualize it. Colton's brow furrowed. Still feel it. Pain without movement confirms a residual feedback loop. It is not structural. So it's in my head. It is in your brain, which is, unfortunately, part of your body. Colton opened his eyes. What do I do about it? Controlled exposure therapy. We reintroduce the motion in safe increments while overriding the false signals. Sounds like a lot of boredom. It is, but it works. Over the next 2 days, they practiced motion drills in silence. No equipment, no resistance bands, just slow, deliberate movement. Colton learned to differentiate between actual strain and phantom discomfort. Dralux monitored every twitch, every hesitation. By the 4th day, Colton could rotate the wrist without flinching. "You will attempt a light grip test," Dralux said, handing him a weighted cylinder. Colton wrapped his fingers around it, lifting slowly. "No pain," he said. "Do not lie." "I'm not." "Then maintain grip for 30 seconds. He did. Dralux recorded the time, then handed him a stylus. "Sign your name." Colton scribbled it across the datapad. Sloppy but legible. "You are cleared for light-duty combat prep. No impacts, no recoil weapons." "Understood." Dralux paused. "You will report any regression immediately." "I will. And you will not attempt to prove anything to anyone." "I'll try." "No. You will succeed." Colton smiled, genuine this time. "Okay. I will." That evening, Dralux logged the final report. Subject has regained full range of motion and adequate grip strength. Nerve feedback has resolved with targeted exposure therapy. Recommend full clearance for standard operations within 2 cycles pending final strength assessment. He paused before closing the file. Addendum: human behavioral recovery is as complex as physical recovery. Pain in their species is not always a signal of damage, it is sometimes a memory. And memories, I have learned, are slow to heal. Dralux shut down the console and turned off the overhead lights. Behind him, the medbay door sealed with a soft hiss. For now, the human was whole again. And that, he decided, was enough.